In the back, today's our last day of this, but starting next week, I'm going to do a travel log basically for 5 weeks, and the schedule of that is at the table in the back. In this seminar, really the background and history, what the Silk Road was all about. Today we'll continue and look at ideas. The next series of lectures are basically, if you went there now, what might you see, where might you go, and some of the highlights of travel. And it'll be restricted to China and Central Asia. So if we won't go further west than outside of Ashgabat in Turkmenistan. So we've looked at what the Silk Road was, we've looked at the cities, we've looked at the traders, we've looked at the people who lived there, who traveled. And today I want to close by going beyond the kind of goods that were exchanged to some of the ideas that moved, and particularly looking at the movement of ideas from west to east, but also and from south to north. But then also a little bit more about some of the technologies that were developed in some of the science technology and science that moved from China to the West. So, I've talked before about the fact that the Silk Road was much more than a trade route, and the history of the Silk Road was really, in addition to trade, the history of the interchange and interaction of cultures. Probably the best examples of this can be found in the area of southern Central Asia area, what's called Bactria, where everything really came together. That's now in the country of Afghanistan. And this, as I say, this is the area that was known as Bactria. And this is really where Alexander established a major presence. So then following Alexander, a lot of this area became Hellenic. That is, they had the culture coming from the Aegean, from who became the Greeks, the Macedonians and the Greeks. And this came in and really began to interact with the local cultures, particularly in the area of the arts. As Alexander's influence waned and his leaders, the people he put into positions of power, died, Bactria declined. And this then opened this area up for some of the nomadic groups to the north and northeast, and they really took over this area of what had been Bactria. Important here from the point of view of ideas and trade was the Kushans. And the Kushan Empire was responsible really for a lot of the artistic synthesis. This is bringing in then the synthesis of Greek, Indian, and then the Central Asian traditions. And this was important for both religious and cultural elected. What's this? Eclecticism, sorry. small senior moment there. For religious and cultural eclecticism that grew in this area. So, just to point this out again, there's this transmission of objects and beliefs from one cultural region to another, and key throughout the history of the Silk Road, as we've talked about many occasions in the past, there were merchant diasporas, and this is particularly characterized by the Sogdians, who, as merchants, carried not only with them their trade goods, but also ideas, and then brought new ideas along with trade goods back. The Cushions had a major empire, and they, unlike the Cushions, the Sogdians basically remained pretty much nomadic. They had settlements all over, but they did not establish a strong political identity such as the Cushions did, so that there was not a political powerhouse, but rather these merchants who were continuing to move back and forth with goods and ideas. It was particularly, the Sogdians were particularly important in this interchange of ideas between about the 3rd and the 8th centuries. They established colonies in China, particularly in the Tarim Basin, but also in Xi'an, the capital of China at the time, and also in northern Pakistan. So you've got the influence, the cultural influence of the Sogdians basically extending throughout from Xi'an into northern Pakistan, through Afghanistan and into Pakistan. So what kinds of ideas were transmitted along the Silk Road? I want to begin by talking about religion, and I want to begin talking about religion with one of the earliest religions, which became very widespread from the center in what was in Persia. That's Zoroastrianism. And this was a religion founded by Zoroaster sometime between about 1500 and 1000 BCE. He was a Persian prophet. He's also known as Zarathustra. So when we talk about Zoroaster, we're talking also about Zarathustra, same guy. It's based on a concept of a duality between good and evil, and it basically deals with the conflict between these two, but the assumption is that there will be ultimately a conquest of evil by good. They have a supreme deity, although they were predominantly monotheistic, that is, had one deity. There were a few lesser gods, but the supreme deity was Ahura Mazda, associated with the sun god, and his earthly symbol was fire. And fire becomes important, as we'll see in just a minute. As I say, it was nominally monotheistic, but it incorporated a number of lesser gods, lesser figures that were picked up from Mesopotamia and India. And so that although it was monotheistic, there was something almost of a pantheon of gods. For example, for the Sogdians, there was a four-armed goddess, Nana, who was one of the most important figures. This is the symbol of Zoroastrianism, the sun god with the chariot, the winged eagle. This shows you the Sogdian representation of Nana, this four-armed goddess, who is contrasting good and evil and light and dark in her four hands. One of the characteristics of Zoroastrianism, which continues down to today, is the exposure of the dead to the elements on what are called towers of silence. It was felt that flesh, if it was buried, would contaminate the earth. And so what happened was that the bodies were placed on these towers of silence. The bones would be picked clean by scavenger birds. And as I say, this burial was rejected because of the question of contamination. In Central Asia, in Transoxiana, Central Asia, the clean bones were then retrieved and stored in ceramic or stone ossuaries, that is a bone container. Fire was important, and fire altars are maintained as a symbol of purity. Some of these fire altars were maintained in temple buildings, and then when the Muslims moved in, some of these temples were converted into mosques. Here you see examples of these towers of silence. The one on the left is a current one. The other is the remnants of one in the Karakoum Desert in Turkmenistan. So that the bodies would be placed here, they would be picked clean, the bones would be collected, and then the bones would be placed in ossuaries. You can see just two examples here. You can also see here the fire altar and the priests here. This one, I think here's the fire altar here. So if there are a number of these in museums, they are archaeological relics. This shows you fire altars. This is a coin, from a Persian coin, showing a fire altar, and then this is an archaeological site with a fire altar. These traditions continue today, both in Zoroastrianism, but also the Parsis in India practice Zoroastrianism. And in Baku, Azerbaijan, there is an active Farsi temple where you can see a fire altar continuing the flame is never extinguished. So this was the official religion of Persia from about the time of Cyrus and Darius during the Sasanian period from about the 3rd to the 7th centuries. It then moved into Sogdiana, became the primary religion of the Sogdians, and then was carried by the Sogdians all the way to Xi'an. And in the practices of Zoroastrianism in China, they did not have towers of silence, but what they did was they had a practice where they would bury a body in an underground tomb, but it would be placed in an altar in such a way that the body was laid on an altar on a ceremonial couch to prevent it from contaminating the earth. So that the tradition of contamination continues even though we've gone a little bit away from the scavenger birds. So that's Zoroastrianism. Another religion of some importance, great importance in this area during later time was what's called Nestorian Christianity. And this was the predominant Christian religion, although there were others. I should also point out, I'm not talking about today, but there were also Jewish people and practitioners of Judaism in this area, but very few, but they were there. This Nestorian Christianity was based on Nestorius. He was the patriarch of Constantinople from about 428, 431 CE. And he held that Christ was two separate entities. And I'm not a theological scholar, and I don't really understand all the distinctions between the Trinity, between a single body with duality, but I'm just going to point out that what they thought was that there were two separate entities, that this was not all in one single prophet or one single person, but there were two kind of separate in the same body, if you will. Well, this didn't go over too well with the big guys In the history of Christianity, there was a very important council held at Ephesus, which is in Greece, in 431. And Nestorius and his followers were considered to be heretics. And they moved then from Greece into Sasanian Persia. There was another church there, the Syrian church. They merged and then dominated this existing Church of the East. So this was a movement of the heretics from outside the centers of Christianity into new territories in Persia. Well, the Sagians had been Zoroastrians, but they're really flexible people. So they became Nestorians. And like they had with Zoroastrianism, they carried their Nestorian religion off to the far reaches, the Tarim Basin, and on into Xi'an. There's evidence, archaeological evidence, that Nestorian Christianity had reached the eastern end of the Tarim Basin at the end of the 7th or early 8th century. Eastern end would be somewhere around the area a bit to the west of Dunhuang. Importantly, there are Nestorian texts among a wide variety of texts that are discovered in what's called the Library Cave at Dunhuang, and I'm going to come back to that later on, talk about the importance of this for understanding the mix of cultures. From the Chinese perspective, Nestorian Christianity, like Buddhism, and we've talked about Buddhism next, had been brought from the West. And there were similarities in that both focused on the moral teachings of a great spiritual leader. For Christianity, it's Christ. For Buddhism, Buddha. The evidence here, these are two Christian tombstones from Xi'an. This is the figure on the left is a Nestorian worship. The figure on the right is a Nestorian tombstone in Chinese. And here are two Christian tombstones, again reflecting Nestorians in Xi'an. Well, there's another religion that played a role, and this is Manichaeism. That was founded by a prophet by the name of Mani, who was born in what is now Iraq in about 216. And basically what he did was he saw this Manichaeism as a new religion that was a successor to and basically completed the teachings of the great leaders that had come before. That is Christ, Buddha, and Zoroaster, along with a few things that came in from some of the Indian religions, such as Hinduism. Again, basically it was a dualistic religion, such as Zoroastrianism. Light, good, and the spiritual were opposed by dark, evil, and the material. It arose in the first half of the 3rd century, prospered into the 7th in western Eurasia, and then it was spread by Sagians as well. So we've got Sagians spreading all kinds of religion throughout the area. And it became the state religion of an important group that we haven't talked much about, but I'll talk about when I talk about China next week. That is the Uyghurs, which are a Muslim minority in what is now Xinjiang. It's said that at its height, Manichaeism was one of the most widely spread religions in the world. So it contained, as I say, a kind of a summation of the teachings of the other great prophets, and they became a syncretic religion that brought in elements from Christianity from Zoroastrianism and also Buddhism. This is a contemporary portrait of Manny, and this next slide shows a service with a teacher in the lower center right, and then the various disciples around. I think this, I can't remember where this is. Well, the first really big, if you will, really big religion in the Silk Road in Central Asia and China, coming from India, was Buddhism. Buddhism developed in India, then moved into China, following the merchants and monks. We talked about merchants and monks carrying Buddhism, and we talked about who the travelers were. But basically, along the Kushan trade routes, the cities to the east, again, the east of the Fair Basin, and Dunhuang becomes important. Under the patronage of merchants, monasteries grew and were founded. Monasteries were founded by practitioners of Buddhism all along the trade routes. There was a form, and I don't know, some of you probably know Buddhism, I don't, but there was a new form of Buddhism called Mahayana, which had some changes that appealed to merchants. Fundamental to Buddhism is the concept of reincarnation. You keep coming back, and hopefully coming back better, as opposed to coming back as a cockroach. But what this new approach suggested was an alternative to this cycle of reincarnation. That is, it became possible to kind of enter a stage of paradise where the Bodhisattvas, I think, as they say, my pronunciation of Buddhist terms, Joe, how is that pronounced? Do you know? Bodhisattvas? Yeah. Bodhisattvas. There's something like that. Anyhow, but important here for the merchants was the fact that you could get merit by making donations to monasteries. And that merit, you could donate gold, silver, lapis, red coral, silk, pearls, and other jewels. So basically, this had a great deal of appeal to merchants because you could basically buy your way into paradise. And this led to the construction of a number of Buddhist monasteries and sites, as we'll see in just a minute. The historic Buddha was thought to be one incarnation of a series of past and future Buddhas, all of whom could be portrayed in statuary and painting. And so this ability, two things combine then, the wealth of merchants and the ability to convey these spiritual figures in painting and in sculpture. This map shows the transmission of Buddhism. Remember, I mentioned a minute ago the Kushan Empire. That's here, this area. What's now Pakistan, Afghanistan, Turkmenistan here. This would be, Turkmenistan down there. This is current Pakistan. This simply shows the importance of this empire as a intermediary between the centers of Buddhism down here and Central Asia. And so basically it shows that the Buddhism was transmitted along the trade routes from India up into this area, and then from there across a much broader area. And remember when I talked about who were the travelers on the Silk Road, I pointed out the importance of the Buddhist monks. These are a couple of statues of those guys. from Gandhara. And this shows you the influence of Greek sculpture and art on the art that's developing here in Central Asia. This points out that the merchants are bringing goods to the temple here, stupa. And then this is an interesting picture because it shows a variety of different ethnic groups all contributing to the Buddha. So that's Buddhism. Well, the next big mover and shaker is Islam. And Islam basically starts here, moves from this small area throughout Northern Africa and throughout Central Asia, Persia, into Central Asia, Kabul, Samarkand. And then remember we talked about the fact that the Battle of the Talas River in the 700s, the 8th century, basically stopped the spread of Islam or Buddha, Islam as a major religion. And then I pointed out before that with the conquering of the Chinese here, they brought artists back to Samarkand. But you can see this very, very large and expansive empire that's Islam. Probably you all know that Islam grew out of the nomadic Bedouin populations in the Arabian Peninsula. It was established by Muhammad, who in 1610 began to receive revelations from the angel Gabriel. It was ideas that were being directly communicated from Allah, the single God, through the angel Gabriel to Muhammad, and then written down. This extended over a period of about 30 years. Muhammad is considered to be the last of the prophets. Moses, Jesus, and Muhammad, and there were basically three peoples of the book then, those three predominant religious groups: Mohammedanism, Islam, Christianity, and Judaism. He is considered to be the last of the prophets. There will be no other prophet, according to Islam, there will be no other prophets after Muhammad. He's the last one. They also recognize all the old prophets. The prophets of the Old Testament, for example, are recognized in Islam. And key in Islam are what are considered to be there are five pillars. It's important to realize that although the last bullet there says following Muhammad's death, there was a split into two groups, Shia and Sunni, based on the secession to the caliphate. It's much more diverse than that. That's a very simplistic look. And if you look at the geographic distribution of Islam, you see that the practice of Islam, the fundamentals are the same, the Quran is the same, it's still in Arabic. But the laws, the practices, and so on are quite diverse, all the way from Indonesia through Africa. And it's to say that there are these two major branches. Yes, those are two major branches, but those are not the only ones. So from, as you saw on that map, from the center in Mecca and Medina, Islam expanded both to the west and to the east, and led to what's considered the largest civilization. Not necessarily the largest empire, but the largest civilization. And I'm not going to get into what defines civilization. What's called Dar al-Islam, and the establishment of a really vast multicultural empire, characterized by cultural and linguistic synthesis into this growing religion. It's based on the Quran, which was dictated to Muhammad by Gabriel. It's considered to be the direct words of God. You cannot change any of the words in the Quran. People, in fact, say that the only way that the Quran can be studied is to study in Arabic, because any translation involves some consideration of meanings of words. So the language of the Quran is Arabic. One of the important caliphates in early Islam were the Umayyads. They had their capital in Damascus. They were then replaced by the Abbasids, had their capital in Baghdad. And during the golden age, what's called the golden age of Islam, there was important growth in literature and science, as well as development of commercial networks. But a lot of the literature and science was developing in these two capital cities. The rise of Islam led to a cultural sphere extending basically from the Western Mediterranean at this time into the Far East. And the practice of Islam had a major impact on the culture and the trade across the whole area of Eurasia. The Islamic cultures incorporated features of elements and traditions from the regions into which the Arabs expanded, from Byzantine architecture and mosaics to Persian and Indian literary themes. So it became very syncretic. But to me, one of the most interesting aspects of the spread of Islam is the influence of Islam on architecture and the spread of monumental, what I would call monumental architecture. I've identified here 5 different categories. We've talked about caravanserais in the past, so I won't talk about those, but I want to talk just a little bit about the other 4, that is mosques, madrasas, minarets, and mausoleums. Mosques are where the center of religious practice. This shows you 2 mosques. Both of these happen to be in Central Asia. The one on the left is the Baba Kameen Mosque in Samarkand. The other is the Friday Mosque in Bukhara, both of which we'll talk about in the next couple of weeks. Madrasas are Islamic schools. They teach not only Islam, they teach the Quran. You memorize the Quran, but they're also the source for education in things like literature, science, mathematics, and so on. These are simply illustrating on the left 3 madrasas, what's called the Rajasthan in Samarkand, and then the one on the right is the Grand Mosque in the center of Bukhara. Minarets. I'm focusing on minarets in the east. The minarets, if you look to the west, in northern Africa, Tunisia, Morocco, Algeria, they have a different structure. They're square. In Central Asia, from Persia on into Central Asia and into China, the minarets are round. The minarets serve as a platform for the mezzanine, for the call to prayer. That's what the tower is designed for, to carry from the top the voice of a mezzanine calling the faithful to prayer. The one on the left is in Turpan, that's in Xinjiang, China, Western China. The one on the right is in Bukhara, and that has a very interesting story, which you will hear when I talk about Bukhara. Mausoleums, the kind of 4th major architectural style or major architectural contribution of Islam into the areas of Central Asia and further east. The mosque the mausoleum on the left is the Samanid mausoleum in Bukhara, one of the very few things that survived the Mongol hordes coming in. And then on the right a Muslim complex just outside of Samarkand, Zarinda, which is probably some of the best examples of Tamarind architecture and tile work in existence. And again, we'll look at those in detail in a couple of weeks. So, looking at arts of the Silk Road, the arts have intersected in a number of ways with the history of trade, religions, and exploration, and a lot of the art is, in fact, religiously based. The arts found along the Silk Road are many times, as I say, an expression of religious ideas that moved across the territories and are basically essential in understanding the history and practice of the communities and cultures that we see. In addition to this, art objects were often important trade commodities, particularly from China moving to the west. The contact with foreign lands had a major impact on Chinese art for two major reasons. One was there was an influence from the outside world on the development of art, but the third was an impetus that produced items that could be exchanged along the routes of the West. Interestingly, many of the figurines that you see in the Tang Dynasty have foreign faces, particularly big noses and beards. And then, of course, many artists made figures that represented gods, prophets, and saints from both indigenous and foreign cultures. An important center for Asian art is in a town called Dunhuang, which we talked about when we talked about the cities. Dunhuang is at the eastern end of the Tarim Basin. You can see the Taklamakan there, that's the point. Also, Dunhuang is close to where the eastern, or the northern, and the southern Silk routes diverge. What Dunhuang is particularly important for is cave art. And became the site of the largest complex of cave art, Chinese art, in an area that's called the Mango Caves, which are in the Gobi Desert, about 25 kilometers from the city. These caves are not natural caves. These caves were carved into the sandstone on the hillsides, and the caves cover a span of about 1,000 years from the 4th to the 14th century, and visually represent a lot of the aspects of Chinese civilization. This is a schematic showing the caves that you can see along the photograph there. The caves along the side of that cliff. And as I say, it's about 25 kilometers from the town of Dunhuang. There are three major forms of art in the caves: painting, sculpture, and architecture. And the patrons of the caves demonstrated their economic power, their social status, religious feelings, and political ideology by determining the size of the cave and the motif. And some of the caves are small, and some of them are quite large. Well, there are a number of different types of art in Dunhuang. There are illustrations of Buddhist sutras, that is, Buddhist stories. There are portraits of donors. There are Daoist deities and mythological figures. There are Spartas, which are winged creatures, musical goddesses, and then simply decorated patterns. But a lot of the illustrations of Buddhist sutras include the figure of the Buddha and his helpers. This is the interior of one of the caves. I'll just show you a few of them. You can see the paintings on the walls, and then the Buddha figure there in the middle. Another example here, a couple of examples here. You can see how ornate these are. One thing show up particularly in these figures. You can see all along the side there. Actually, you can see it in the one on the right. The eyes have been scratched out, and that was done when the Muslims came in, because they theoretically do not allow the production or the presentation of the human form, and so they defaced a number of these paintings because of their religious objection to the depiction of humans. This is I think one of my favorites. You can see all these figures. Well, the thing that's interesting about the figures is that there are different ethnicities. And there are different kinds of people. In many cases, there would be portraits of the donors included in the painting. And this is an example then of patrons and the Buddha figure there in the center. Well, in addition, from a cultural and historical point of view, in addition to the art of Dunhuang, it's terribly important from the perspective of what's called the library cave. And the library cave shows the tolerance of different religions that characterize the Silkwood communities. There were Buddhist librarians, monks, and they saved not only the texts from their own religion, but also scraps of all kinds of documents in case they might prove useful in the future. Includes texts written in Sanskrit, Khotanese, Khotan remember down on the southern edge of the Taklamakan, Tibetan, Uyghur, and Sogdians. And these texts represent all of the major religions: Manichaeism, Zoroastrianism, Christianity, Judaism, and of course Buddhism. So all these things were in a cave. There was a Buddhist priest. I talked a little bit about this when we talked about Errol Stein. There was a priest, Taoist priest, Wang, who was the guardian of the shrines of Dunhuang. He was an admirer of the Buddhist monk that we talked about, who had been made a major pilgrimage, Zunzhan. And this monk had traveled from Dunhuang to India in search of manuscripts, brought the manuscripts back. Some of them remained in Dunhuang, and others went to Xi'an. And when Wang discovered this library cave and then sealed it off, he approached the Chinese officials, told them about it. They didn't care anything about it. Errol Stein heard about it, convinced Wang to show him the contents by discussing the travels of Xuanzang with him, and got access to the cave. The cave contained hundreds of scrolls, banners, paintings, including Chinese Buddhist manuscripts that date from the 5th century, Tibetan leaves from the 8th and 9th centuries, papers with text written in Sanskrit and other indigenous languages, including the earliest known writing in Sogdian, temple banners, paintings on silk and linen, and then finally the copy of the Diamond Sutra, which is a Buddhist work and considered to be the oldest known example of a printed book. This is after Stein got a few thousand manuscripts. This is another archaeologist. It just shows the interior of the cave. You can see the manuscripts there. Subsequently, for illustrative purposes, the piled manuscripts were piled outside of the cave, and this is a very popular place to visit. So we talked about religion, we talked about art. I want to close by talking about some of the scientific and technological advances that were transmitted along the Silk Road. We talked about, last week, talking about paper and silk making, but there were also a number of other technologies and ideas that were transmitted. Islamic scholars during the Islamic Golden Age contributed importantly to the development of mathematics, astronomer, and medicine. And some people attribute the Renaissance to the discovery of what the Muslims had done earlier. An invention of considerable importance was the invention of gunpowder and firearms, and that was based on the practice of alchemy, trying to convert base metals and so on into gold. But they produced an explosive formula in the middle of the Tang period. It was then weaponized later in the Song dynasty, and by the latter part of the 13th century, they had cannons. And then the technology of gunpowder and arms traveled rapidly to the west. This is an early Chinese cannon. This is a Mongol hand cannon, first edition of a Colt 45. Another important invention, particularly for subsequent sailing, navigation, and expansion of sea routes, was the compass. And the compass basically changed the world and grew out of Chinese invention. By the 12th century, the Song were floating a needle on a piece of brush in a bowl of water, markings on the ends indicating the points of or markings on the rim indicating the points of the Chinese compass. Here are two early Chinese compasses, one the spoon, the other illustrating the one that I just mentioned, the floating needle. But finding magnetic north and making important contributions to the ability to navigate. There were also important Islamic scholars, and if you were here for the Islamic Golden Age great courses, these will be familiar names to you. Al-Biruni and Ibn Sina were two important ones. Al-Biruni was born in what's now Turkmenistan, Erzurum, died in Afghanistan in 1048. And he was a polymath. He made significant contributions to a number of scientific areas, including both astronomy and mathematics. Ibn Sina, known in the West as Abyssinia, was born in Bukhara in 980 and died in Persia in 1037. He's probably, of all the Islamic scientists, the best one that's best known in the West. He was a physician, astronomer, physicist, and mathematician, but he's best known for his work in medicine, what's called the Canon of Medicine, which was basically a medical encyclopedia and translated, became a standard medical textbook in the European universities into the 17th century, one of the great men of early medicine. Two other scholars were Al-Khwarizmi and then Omar Khayyam. And Al-Khwarizmi was born in Khiva, died in Baghdad, and he is considered to be the founder of modern mathematics. He introduced the Indian system of numbers, numerical system, and that included the concept of zero, which hadn't existed before. And then also the name algorithm comes from his name, and he invented a method of calculation, which is so fundamental to mathematics. Omar Khayyam was born in 1048, died in 1131 in Persia. He's probably best known in the West as a poet. The Rubaiyat of Omar Khayyam may ring a bell. But in addition to being a poet, he was a very accomplished mathematician, astronomer, and philosopher. So a lot of these people, it's really interesting, the diversity of their expertise, and the fact that the term polymath refers to somebody who has multiple skills. You know, the fact that you work in medicine, you work in mathematics, you work in philosophy, you work in astronomy, you work in medicine. As I say, if you were here for the Islamic Golden Age course, you know the importance of their contributions to Western science. The last person I want to refer to is the person who was the grandson of Amir Tamir of Tamerlane, a guy named Ulugh Beg, who was a scholar and astronomer in Samarkand. And what you see here is his observatory. The gateway entrance is reconstructed. But what you see here is an underground track which is used for plotting the travel of planets. I have absolutely no idea how it worked. But he calculated the circumference of the Earth to within a very small percentage of the true circumference that was calculated later. So Ulugh Beg, he also built one of the madrasas in Rajasthan and Samarkand that I showed you a few minutes ago. So with that, I will close. And I would encourage any questions or comments. Thank you. Yeah, Al?
Well, just to comment on Muhammad being the last of the prophets. When I was in grad school, I roomed with a couple who were Baha'is, and they had their own new prophet, and so that was anathema to the established Muslims, and they're still persecuted.
Yeah. That's their belief, and if you bring in a new prophet, that is apostasy. I'm seriously considering doing a seminar like this on Islam sometime next year. It would not focus on the politics of Islam, but it would focus on the history and history of beliefs and art and architecture. So I may do that here. Okay, any other comments? Okay, thanks a lot. As I say, this is the end of this. Next week, we'll start a travel log. And there's a schedule for that is in the back. Thank you.